we're back in Chicago.
And we're in
Back.
Chicago.
Hey, we're back. We're at home. Um,
For now.
don't know what that means. Don't know
I'm
what you
ready to
mean
be
by that.
nomad when you are. Nomadic life. I come from a lineage of Germans that would just nomadically go around and Vikings that would pillage villages. I don't know, Celtic people. So I'm used to being a nomad. How are you doing?
Hey, Bob.
Hi.
What's up? We're talking about being nomads. Here's the thing. I don't fully disagree with that. I think, being settled in one place
Mm-hmm.
is not something that I'm like, oh, I want my forever home. And, for a long time, I think I felt bad about that because so many people are like, oh, you get your one house and you live in it for 50 years. And I'm like, man, that sounds like torture.
You don't want your forever home, you want your for a while homes.
Mm, that's one way to put it. No, I mean, I think what I like a change of pace. I like a change of scenery. And speaking of ancestors, I do think a lot of our ancestors, that's what they did. The land over here isn't giving them what they need. They migrated to a different area. Oh, this place ran out of water. Well, we're going to go find some water. And, that, I don't think we would call it nomadic, but um, that mentality and that way of life, I think, is what I just feel. I'm very connected to my ancestors.
Well, they settled, though. The word settler comes from settling and settling down. And I think one of our show is called Amid Life Millennial. One of the cliches about millennials is they don't want to settle. We have this ongoing wanderlust. We don't want to necessarily, we're grown up, but we don't want to grow up and settle down.
Yikes.
And so it's why our generation is having children at an older age. They're getting married older. Some of them aren't getting married at all. And I think, and they're buying fewer homes, right? Some of that's also because they're priced out from the boomers. But that's another thing. A lot of boomers aren't selling. So boomers are like, they are settled. Like,
boomers are the ones that got their
settled.
forever home, and their forever home is like
And they're forever
going
living.
through like, yeah.
And they're forever in power.
Eternity. It's forever everything. Like just
Forever, ever?
ever. So yeah. I don't know.
Thanks, boomer.
I don't like for anybody who's listening, the 10 of you.
9 last week.
Oh no, damn.
But it'll be 10 this week because I'll give it a listen in the car.
Thanks. But no, for those of you listening, like I don't want anybody to think like we're trying to say that living in a house forever is bad. It's just not for us.
Yeah,
it's not for us.
It's here's the thing. As we sit in this nice condo that is on the market, so if you want to buy it, you could make an offer. Make an offer we couldn't refuse,
Yeah,
that was the worst Italian accent.
We gotta watch that movie though.
Is it The Godfather?
Yeah.
Or, you know what I get mixed up? It's The Godfather and Goodfellas. Is that both Italian movies?
Have you seen Goodfellas?
Have you seen The Good Father?
We should watch Goodfellas.
Godfellas.
First. Watch Goodfellas. There's some crazy scenes in that movie. But anyway, we're really getting off topic here. But we do want to watch.
I think we just got back from Italy, and the Italian's still in me, and the midday sort of just whatever. Midday glass of bottle of wine.
Midday glass of a bottle.
I'm just kidding. I don't have a bottle of wine every day per se.
Yikes.
I know we've been good about that. But the point is,
back to the point.
What is the point? The point is we move around every 3 to 5 years, so we are sort of the antithesis of the settlers, and I think that that's okay. I think for a while we tried to settle in a suburb, didn't like that. We came back to the city, like that, but can't find the place that fits our needs of a family of 4.
Yeah.
Back to what I said earlier is, I look around, the city increasingly is a place for, affluent people that are either single or married and have no kids.
Yeah.
And
there's
it's
so
weird
many
why that is.
2-bedroom places that you find, and it's like, okay, is this like a roommate situation? Like, or like one kid or no kid? Like, is that second room and guest room? Because if you have more than 2 kids in the city, like it is feeling difficult to actually find a place where there's space for a family.
If you have more than 2 kids in the city, you're Irish Catholic. If you have more than 2 kids in the city, you're Mormon.
You got another?
If you have 2 kids in the city, you're Italian Catholic. All right. So, anyways, see, we have 2 kids because one of us Catholic. You know, it's like we sort of, if you would have if you would have been like born and raised Catholic, we'd had like 80 kids by now.
Yikes.
And so, anyways, kids aside, we have 2 lovely kids, a boy and a girl. We're grateful for it. We're settled in that regard. The problem is, 60 years ago, the city was where families lived, families thrived, and there's plenty of families that live here and thrive here. But I've looked into the data because I'm a data cruncher, and you know, school enrollment has gone down significantly. Like, there's less families in the city, and the wealth gap has continued to widen. The wealth gap has widened because the people that have kids in the city, you know, they're here. They maybe can't afford to go out to the suburbs. It's like sort of a contradiction. They are maybe in a neighborhood where they don't necessarily want to be, but the rent is low and they can afford it.
I see.
And so it's just
It sucks.
You know, it's
Overall, it freaking sucks. And the desire to still find a place where we can, you know, get the kids their own bedrooms, and I know it's not
all we're
a
asking.
requirement, you know, for growing up. There's plenty of people who have shared, you know, much smaller places, but it's just the small ask of like, hey, you know, we just want another few hundred square feet or whatever it is for a bedroom. Like, that's it.
All we want is a few hundred more square feet on the lake with a beautiful view of the city and an office and a
Maybe
pool
a rooftop.
and a rooftop
A
and
marketplace.
a Michelin-star restaurant inside of it.
Maybe a gym.
You know, it's all we want. It's all we want. It's it.
It's not much.
It's
We're not
it.
asking for much.
And maybe 24/7 room service. I mean, we should just live in a hotel.
You know, I thought about that. I thought about that. No. Here's the thing.
You and I, you know, rock stars like used to do that. Like I read these stories about like when the Rolling Stones were on tour, other things they were doing that we won't talk about in the podcast. But they would be like living out of hotels. Like rock stars did that back in the day. It's like I'm staying at the hotel for like 2 months, and I'm like, can I do that?
How cool would that be? I mean, it might be a little bit strange after a while, but I mean, I can get used to that. A little service here and there. But I mean, here's the thing: we're keeping our heads up because, just like, you know, our peers,
head up.
we know what you guys are going through, and it sucks. And even though everybody I speak to, like, I talk to a lot of different people about this because it's like, you know, you kind of want to feel out, like, hey, is it just a Bob and DeAnna thing, or
I think other people
it's not?
get unsettled. This is a philosophical question, which is what I like to do. Do we tell ourselves when we're settled that we like it, or, you know, human beings? There's a really great book that I'm about tenth of the way through. That's about controlling the population.
No, I'm going to get a copy of the book. I don't care if I have to sell my
That's
right.
not
arm.
at all where I was going to go with this.
Sorry.
We can talk about
No. You can get back to your point.
We can talk about controlling the population.
No, tell me about your book. I want to know about your book.
No, you don't. Homo sapiens. It's I'm about a tenth of the way through. Started it 5 years ago. Probably won't finish it. But the things that I know about it is like the book doesn't tell you this. Like, we were nomadic people. We were tribes of people 50,000, 100,000 years ago. And there's 3% of our DNA has like Neanderthal in it. Neanderthal.
Yeah.
And Neanderthal, that's enthralling that we have Neanderthal in our DNA. And so my point is there was clearly like a lot of movement activity, wanting to go to a different place. You know, some of the negative things like conquering different places, going to America, conquest, which brought a lot of things. You know, and other things. But my point is, it clearly, you know, was a part of our upbringing, and even like in Africa, our Native American tribes, they would move too. Like everybody moved wherever you are in the world, it was this like almost a spiritual thing, like not being fully, settled in where you are. And I think it's not a bad thing, but
And
we have taught ourselves to settle in one place. It's
I
like a
think
recent
there's
phenomenon.
probably a lot of reasons why, but going back to what you just said about like the like spiritual aspect of moving, one of my favorite phrases is like go with the flow.
Yeah.
I know for some people that's kind of like I don't want to go with the flow. I want things to be my way, and you're probably difficult to be around. But if you go with the flow of life, and I feel like that's what the ancient tribes and our ancient
Mm-hmm.
ancestors would do. They would literally go with the flow, whether
Mm-hmm.
that be a river,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the trees and where the plants grow and where the animals
Uh,
go, and
yeah.
they follow that flow of life,
Yeah.
and they didn't think about, oh well, I have to be here because I really love this view.
Mm.
I love this view. But if I actually want to embrace that idea of like going with the flow, like
Yeah.
where is the flow
Well,
taking you
this
in
is
life?
fascinating. So, the like all big cities, I mean, all globally, almost always have a source of water around it.
Yeah,
That's why we were in Rome a couple weeks ago. The Tiber River,
I think so. Yeah.
the Tiber River. By the way, side note, I took a run by the Tiber River in Rome. It was early one morning, and it just stenched of urine. And I remember, like, I was gonna go. I was like, "Oh, this is so nice. I'm gonna go down to like by the water," and I'm like, "Nope." I started running away.
I'm glad you didn't.
It's all good. I mean, you gotta pee somewhere, so you gotta go with the flow. And when the flow goes, you gotta go. Um, so, but that time I sort of went away from the flow of
Hmm.
urine and smell, um, back to our hotel. So, point being, a lot of that's where cities are based on water and the flow. I love this imagery, DeAnna. Like, go with the flow. People actually went where the flow was because that was what brought them life. Water brings life. It's essential. It's like the only thing that's super essential. That and food, but it's more essential than food. We are water.
Speaking of water, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able
We
to
are
pull up
water, man.
the thing I want to show you on my phone because it's connected to the. Anyway,
I can
but
pull it up. What
there,
do you want to show me?
well, you won't be able to find it because it's on a page that I liked on Instagram. But anyway,
Oh boy.
it's
Oh boy. Socials. Oh.
that's mostly how our listeners probably even find us is by social. Are you insulting them? Anyway, no, it was an interesting research done. I mean, I don't think we need researchers to tell us this, but sitting by and observing bodies of water, whether they be
Mm.
rivers, creeks, oceans, lakes, actually does has a great effect on our blood pressure
Wow.
and
Not
stillness.
surprised by that.
And I was reading it, and I didn't. I wish I would have saved it. I didn't think
Love
we were
that.
going to talk about this today, but
Maybe you
whenever
could share it on social media when we tease this.
it's a good idea. But I mean, just think about whenever you are by water. Now, there are some people who have fear of water, but I'm just talking about like going to like a beach, or you're camping and you're by a river, or whatever your situation is. Think about how much peace that brings you. Why we like going to beaches. Why we like being
Mm.
near water. People go on vacations. Like I don't even like to actually swim. I can swim. Plot twist. But I don't like to.
Yeah.
But I love being by the water.
Okay, two things. One, fear of water may be an indirect fear of life, but that's another conversation. And then you brought up a good point, DeAnna. When we were in Italy, or any place we go, when there's water, one of the most memorable things we do and our kids do is put our feet in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I watch our son Josh, who we got to get him to swim. That's another story. He was terrified of swimming, but he loves water. He loves being in water. And just watching him, how excited they get. They could spend hours just dipping their toes in the water.
Literally.
And I think this is why so much religion uses baptism, like
holy
water of
cleansing with water.
It is, and the one that I'm thinking of is Christianity, but I'm sure like Islam and Judaism and Hinduism and all like major faiths use water as a symbol of life, because it is. And so this flow, this movement, it's maybe we're made to move, and maybe it's not literally move, but maybe it is. I think that this flow of one of my favorite verses in the gospel is in chapter 5 of I think Matthew, where Jesus is like, be like the birds and just don't worry about your clothes. After I bought a bunch of clothes today, don't worry about like what food you're going to eat after we got our HelloFresh for the week. um, don't worry about these things. And I'm like, what's going to be for dinner tonight? But
Look,
like,
I haven't had manna in ever in my life, so.
your ancestors ate manna in the desert. This is just gonna start singing here. This is like a musical. Oof, don't say that. So the point is, at least this one, don't say musical in front of this one. That's a naughty word. But the point being, like, this, not worried about where you're going, where you're moving, where you're flowing. I mean, that is a powerful way to live. And for some people, I think, kind of coming full circle, why we are seeing sort of a movement toward the nomadic lifestyle. I mean, there's people they call the term digital nomads. In countries like Portugal, you can get a digital nomadic visa, basically saying, like, I have a job where I can work anywhere, or I'm self-employed, I can work anywhere, and I'm paying taxes to somebody. I mean, whatever, who cares? But I'm a digital nomad. And I think that's a really cool thing. You've got this movement, which I kind of cringe for, like, the way they frame it as, like, unschooling my kids, where, like, I'm gonna go and travel the world with my kids. I hate that term, but
you like the idea.
I do. I mean,
Yeah,
because you could teach your children anywhere.
Well, you can, but there's so much to learn that's like outside of the walls of a traditional school, and when I say learn, I'm not talking about what Benjamin Franklin said when he was 12. Nobody gives a damn. Okay? But how can you talk to your actual living and breathing peers?
Yeah.
Can you pick up on emotional nonverbal cues? Those are things that, I'll be honest with you. If you can't read the room, I'm not talking about reading a little textbook. We can all learn how to read. But reading the room, understanding your people, understanding your spouse, understanding your kids, your parents, what they're going through, and we both have parents who are aging, and it's like, okay, well, maybe there's some things that they do that we don't understand. We're not there yet. They have experienced a part of life that we can, hope that we get blessed to, experience, but try to understand it. Try to understand, hey, you said this one thing, maybe you didn't mean it that way, maybe you did mean it that way. And you mean it that way because of something that you experienced. There are ways that people can learn, like even when we were in Italy, what I love to observe is, well, actually, anywhere we travel outside of the country. Because, you go, you're American, they can tell you're American, you're like, okay, what do people really think about Americans in other countries? And I think it's not so much what they think about Americans, it's what they think about how you behave.
Present yourself.
How you present yourself. If you come in and you're like, I don't know anything about anything, and I can't read this, and I don't know what this is, I just give up. Yeah, that's freaking irritating. Yeah, instead of, you go in, you at least make an attempt, speak the language, ask for help, let them know, hey, I'm trying. Like, it's just the effort. But you only learn that when you have to experience other people and other cultures, and that's one thing I love about taking our kids everywhere is, it is, well, I mean, we've been traveling with them so long now that it's not that intimidating. But if you're just starting out, if you're a parent and you're like, man, I really want to go here, but I don't know if I want to bring the kids, bring them.
Yeah.
Don't miss an opportunity for education, because there are things that our kids have been learning that we don't sit around and talk like, okay, honey, did you say nice to the nice man? Did you say hello to him? Like, you don't have to do that. But they're learning indirectly. They're learning from us, how we, go with the flow of life. But more importantly, there's an aspect of travel where you actually learn about yourself. You learn your fears, like your actual fears. Not this I think I'm afraid of X, Y, and Z. Like, you get put into an environment you've never been, roads you've never traveled.
Yeah.
Like that's like that human instinct to be like, hey, you're on guard, you're learning, whoa. And to be able to give your kids that kind of experience at a younger age, they're not going to be the type of people that's like, well, I'm kind of afraid to go to that neighborhood because it's, no, you can, look, people always talk about this, like, in Chicago is such a scary city. Oh, I don't know. Here's the thing. Will you go on the south side acting buck wild for no reason? Would you?
I wouldn't.
Because here's the thing. You, if you know enough about people, if you've been around these scary, shady people who you have all these assumptions about, if you've actually met or like talked to people and like understood where they came from, you wouldn't be clutching your pearls when you see somebody coming across the street. You just be like, all right, I'm going to notice if this guy is being a little threatening, if this person seems like they might be up to no good, or if it's just a guy.
Yeah.
If it's just a guy, and you're sitting there clutching your bag and your pearls, like you think, yes, you will stand out in a very bad way.
It's interesting. Some of the problems we have in the city, increased carjackings, increased armed robberies. It's a lot of young men doing it. It's not women, usually men doing it. And I just had an idea. What if you could have a program where underprivileged youth got to travel the world? Because what you're saying is something that's fascinating to me. I think they have the same problem that people that live in a rural area that end up drunk driving or doing some bad stuff or doing drugs or whatever or doing crystal meth have. I think urban poor and rural poor, the similarities is they can't get out of their situation. They've never experienced anything aside of their neighborhood or their little town.
That's really
imagine that being, how cool of a nonprofit would that be, where you could take underprivileged kids, it could be urban, it could be rural kids, and be like, we're going to go to Paris, France for a week.
What I'll say to that, why I think that's actually very true, is, I just learned recently that one of my younger cousins, he's not young anymore, but when he was younger, my parents had the house out in Plainfield, and it was out there.
It's a field of plainness.
Yes. And so for the family that still lived in the city, to come out and visit, what I didn't know during all those years that they would come out and visit us was that was their way of getting out.
Yeah, by the way.
That was their experience of something outside of, the inner city of Chicago. And just recently, one of the cousins vocalized it. He put it to words. He said, if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't even know what possibilities there were.
Right.
And I don't want to say it means so much to me because it wasn't my house, it was my parents' house, but that meant a lot.
Yeah, you took it for granted, and on the flip side, I think when people visit us in Chicago, it's like, oh my God, this big city. But again, going to Paris would be cool, going to travel the world, but just getting out of your
He travels the world now, by the way, which is amazing.
Getting out of your inner circle because sometimes that circle is tough. And I kind of, speaking of circles, I think we're coming full circle. No, for real, the people that get entrenched in their little circle, human beings get frustrated and infighting and bad
lots
things
of
happen.
Conflict.
Everything from drug use to, bad behavior to whatever.
Lack of ambition.
I think that stems from I'll say a shallow view of the world. Shallow view insofar as you've never even been able to fathom getting out of where you are. So shallowness, we use a term like, this guy's so shallow, or this person's shallow, it's got a negative connotation, and it is kind of negative, but sometimes if you're not taught to get into the water and swim, you're going to be in the shallow end of the pool the whole time, your whole life. And I think that if you're not taught to flow, man, I do feel bad for you. And Dee, we didn't travel much as kids. We got out a little bit. I think we both got our token Orlando trip. Thanks, Mom and Dad, both sides. I was fortunate where I got a few places, mainly car trips. But I know you went down for family reunions, right? Probably didn't love it at the time, but
Because I hate road trips.
yeah, that's another story. Um, that's a part of the flow you're not in favor
I
of.
like the road trip in Cabo. That was
Yeah.
fun.
Uh, so I think that getting out of your comfort zone, it teaches you things. Uh, and I think being too too focused on like one zone, I don't think it's healthy for people. And I think this is why, um, it's not the only reason why people do bad things, but I think it surely doesn't help. The times that I'm like stir crazy in life is when I think I can't get out of a situation.
Mm.
And I think that's how people like when you feel like you cannot move.
Yeah.
You're
Or-
desperate. Or you can't get out of a job. Or
Mhm.
I'm never gonna, it's those negative thoughts that get pushed in. And I think when you feel like I'm never gonna get out of this neighborhood, I'm never gonna get out of this town, you're gonna, more likely than not, you're gonna just turn to stuff that's gonna mentally get you out of there, or in the short term get you enough money to
Yeah.
like do something to get you out of there. The reason why people do bad things in life is typically they they have a better incentive to do that than to do something good or healthy for themselves.
I mean, it's understandable. I mean, to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean,
Like
to an
I
extent.
feel like when it comes to different opportunities, like I always think about stealing. Had a friend when I was a lot younger who she made it a thing to like shoplift,
we've been stolen from our
and I just remember thinking to myself like, why though? Because it wasn't like she came from a family that was pretty well off, so it wasn't a matter of she didn't have the means to purchase. She had an opportunity to do something that was giving her excitement in life. Maybe there's other stories of same family doing things to get attention from their parents. And so again, it's usually it's not exactly an escape, but it's an alternative way to get something that you want.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've had stuff stolen from us, and there's oftentimes some redemption stories there which are powerful, which we could share at another time. But the one time I got stolen at gunpoint, I mean, I didn't double check on it,
Yeah.
because you're not gonna do that. But
And let's see how many bullets you got in that gun first.
it was in Brazil, and I was traveling with a friend of mine from college, and we went to like Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. Those are big cities. Rio de Janeiro is like we went to the favelas. So we actually toured like the slums. They call it like like the shanty towns of sorts. Didn't get anything stolen. In his small town, walking back from the gym at 11:30 a.m., some kid, held us up and gave us stuff. And it was like getting robbed in a different language is kind of funny in hindsight, because he like Raphael's like translating for me as we're getting robbed, and I'm like, oh, he wants us to sit on the curb. That's peculiar. Like, what the hell is this? I'm thinking in my mind like, oh, and then I'm like, why is his hand like sort of here in his pocket? And afterward,
You're like,
and then
oh.
Raphael translates at the end. He's like, I'm like, oh crap. Actually, honestly,
You
getting
didn't-
robbed in a different language was way
Probably-
less terrifying.
Oh, I can imagine.
But where did we get robbed? Small town.
Yeah.
In Brazil.
Yeah.
Daylight.
Look.
That kid probably had nothing else to do.
When I worked,
Nothing else to do.
I was in high school working at
Oh,
the ice cream shop in the suburbs, the safe place. Also, store got held up at gunpoint.
Someone you knew.
Funny thing is, it was a kid who I knew, so they were able to catch him that night. Because I'm like, I was very pissed. Because at first he walked into the store, and I'm like, hey, it's what's his face? I'm not gonna say his name because he's out of jail now. But I was just like,
His name wasn't Skinny Jimmy.
Nope.
It's the opposite of that, I suppose.
But anyway, it's just it's interesting because, again, this idea that people have, again, not knowing their environment. One could say like, oh, we live in a dangerous city, but the two instances that where we actually were
and
threatened
our own lives, but also like actual things stolen from us. One was at Chicago O'Hare Airport. Someone
Which
took
is why
a
I will
GoPro.
never check another bag. I will stuff as much as I can into a carry-on. You're not gonna steal from me no more.
And then the other place was back in Plainfield.
At our house.
A TV got stolen from our
the first year we
porch.
lived out there. We were like, let's buy ourselves a new TV.
And then
We never saw that TV.
So someone enjoyed that TV.
I don't want to think about that TV.
Yeah. Anyways, so I think this was go with the flow is sort of the theme of this episode, and I think we should start go with the flow nonprofit. Let's do it. What do you guys think?
Always with the business ideas here.
I know. Nonprofits are not business, and
somebody's making money.
Someone's got to be the executive director. This has been a really good conversation. I don't think we've solved our nomadic desires, but I'm going to embrace the go with the flow, and DeAnna, I hope you do too.
Well, I'm usually one that's trying to tell people to go with the flow. Just relax. Take it easy.
Chill.
It's okay to
I think it's worth sort of, okay, before we go, I do want to talk about this because the go with the flow.
Oh, boy.
I'm going to poke a little hole in this.
Oh.
Let the water seep out. How do you know which flow to go with?
How do you
There's
know?
not just one flow in life.
That's true. That's a very good question, and I really do think it comes down to your inner wisdom. Mm-hmm. And I don't say that lightly.
Do it divinely. Plug it.
I just truly believe that we all have inner wisdom buried somewhere. And it can be buried by things we learned from our religious upbringing, from our school teachings, from things our parents did, things that we learned from school, like everything that we are being taught.
Things we didn't learn, too.
Things we didn't learn. But what I'm talking about specifically is like the pile-on of different things. Like, just historically, like, people did things because some god or goddess told them to, or they felt like they needed to worship this person, and just made shit up as they went. And over time,
to justify why they did things.
Yeah. But, in modern day, we still have things that we were taught, things that were said to us, ideas that were put into our heads. And, we tend to form opinions about ourselves based on assumptions from other people and everything else that has clouded our sense of, inner self-wisdom.
Yeah.
So when I think of the flow, it's like, also think of it like this, trusting your gut. I say this to you and the kids and anybody who, this conversation comes up, always trust your gut. And it's not just a, esoteric kind of idea. There is actual, research that shows, when you're not feeling good about a certain situation, we use this word like the vibe was off or blah, blah, blah. The word vibe comes from vibration. And so if we imagine that we are all vibrating and emitting some sort of energy, there's good energy. You walk into a room and there's somebody who's smiling and happy and bubbly, and you pick up on the energy. Versus you walk into a room and somebody's sitting there like this.
Yeah.
Okay, that energy that you might be putting off is a vibe. It is a vibrational energy. And so being able to recognize that, and even last night, so this is a true story. We went out for a date. On our way home, we got into a lift. And the guy had really good energy, okay? It really was. He walked in, hi, here's my name. But we were so tired that we kind of just said hey, okay, cool. And we're silent. And then I got home, and because then you feel kind of awkward because I'm like, the guy did nothing wrong, but I felt like the energy we brought was low. And just being able to recognize that part of yourselves, being extremely self-aware. And so, yeah, I do think trusting your gut is another way to think about going with the flow. Yeah. When you walk into a room that you don't want to be in that room. And I'm not talking about, I'm afraid and I'm intimidated. I mean, there's a lot of people going out on dates and whatnot. You go, you meet this person, and you sit down, and something ain't right, and you want to make it work because you're lonely and you've been trying to find someone, and they're kind of cute, and blah blah blah, and you want to try to make it work, but you're not listening to that. Your gut will churn
Yeah.
and try to tell you, hey, this isn't it. Our bodies tell us everything. I mean, from headaches and migraines. Like, I was getting migraines for years until recently. Um, I knew a girl she broke out into what she was calling it leprosy. It was not leprosy, but she went and got every single test done under the sun, and doctors, everything was coming back negative. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. We don't know what this is. It was stress.
Mm-hmm.
It was stress. Her body was trying to tell her she was in an extremely stressful situation. I was able to crack the code. But
well, yeah, I mean, I think the gut. Here's the thing, though. In order to trust your gut, you need to do that inner work. And I think a lot of people that have constant, maybe like gut health issues or something, maybe you got to look into that. Maybe it isn't that all these situations are bad, but maybe there's something you got to work on health wise or wisdom wise.
Or just a situation wise. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of
maybe
people
you're putting yourself in these bad situations.
Or you
all
don't
the time.
realize, yeah, like if especially when it comes to grief.
By the way, we're not doctors, so this is all
Right.
like,
So definitely talk to a professional. But grief. I can speak to my own mother when my grandmother passed away. That sort of grief and what that did over the years following, there was a lot of stress that came with that, and getting a grip on it and trying to, like, at least say, hey, this is happening because of X, Y, or Z. You're not making a judgment on whether that X, Y, or Z is good or bad, but if this is the thing that is happening, this is why I can't eat. This is why I can't sleep. This is why I can't get up. This is why I'm sluggish. Okay, cool. You got to work through that then.
Yeah, and so the grief is tough. That's one of the hardest things. I think where I would say is working in that inner wisdom and inner peace. This is, I didn't go down too much of this rabbit hole, but I was always intrigued when we were at Loyola, especially by, like, I've talked about it before in the podcast, like Ignatian spirituality. And this is very Eastern too, in the sense that don't be attached to anything in life.
Oh, yeah.
That includes people. Like, as a happily married person, love my wife to death.
No strings are attached.
But gosh, trying to make something serious statement.
Sorry.
My point is, like, grief is a real thing. We love somebody, they pass away. It's terrible, and it's like, I can only imagine, and we're going to deal with that over the years. People we love are going to die, and we're going to grieve. That's healthy. That's understandable. It's to be expected as a human being.
Yeah.
But to have closure and to move on in spite of that, I mean, that's the only decision we have, and that's the true, like, you're only going to find inner peace if you realize, like, this is all a flowing thing. It is all flowing. People are going to flow in and out of our lives. They might be with us for 50 years as a happily married couple, 60 years, I have an uncle dealing with this. His wife has Alzheimer's, my aunt, and, that's got to be tough, right? You haven't lost them, but you've lost a part of them. And I think that as we age, we change, we pass away, it's sad, but as the people that survive, the only way we're going to keep moving forward in whatever our flow is supposed to be is by having that inner peace and realizing I'm not my thoughts. So I like, when I have these thoughts of grief and sadness, that's not me. That's me dealing with it. And I'm also, like, you talk about this, DeAnna, in your Do It Divinely course, or, whatever that is shaping up to be, is like, we can only control what we can control. So we are not, like, I am a son, I am a husband, but that doesn't define me. I am a spiritual person, I'm religious, I do these things, I'm a business owner, but that doesn't define me. if one of those things defines you more than just I am a child of God, or I am this. I am just I even beyond that, I am created. I exist. Then you're gonna be disappointed. You're gonna have your life interrupted, and you're never gonna sort of feel like you accomplished what you want. The people that I think get it as close as you can in life realize like the paradox of it all is like it's all very important, but it's all also meaningless. Because the only thing that matters is that we are.
Preach. We are. We're here.
We're loved. I mean, I believe we are loved by a higher power, and that gives me hope. But it, I'm not defined by the title or the institution.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I think that you're just
to be able to separate those things, especially later in life. I think that's where it gets more difficult. When you're a kid, you don't quite walk into a room and say, I'm this, I'm, that. High school, maybe you have like the goth kids, you got the jock kids, and that's kind of where your identity starts to become, starts forming. But those are the years where a lot of us were just trying things out and just like seeing, do I fit here? Do I like these things? But I think the problem begins when you no longer can see that line.
Mm-hmm.
When it's no longer, hey, I'm doing this because I'm not sure or I just want to try it. And then it just becomes, wow, I'm just a mom now. That's what I do. I'm just a mom. And it's like, yeah, but who were you before you were a mom? Because like that person is equally important.
Mm-hmm.
It's not important just for you. It's important for your kids to see. If you're lucky enough to have, grandchildren and, see your family flourish, like what service are you doing to them by just only doing mom things? I can only do things as a mom. It's like, okay, but like you have a sense of humor, you have a sense of style, you're funny, you're outgoing, you like to dance. Where's that? Don't lose that part.
Yeah, don't. I mean, the contradiction of, I've heard things like family is everything, or stick with the blood, right, and all that stuff. And I get historically we've, as tribal people, family has been a lot to us. But again, the complication is there when you elevate that above it all. You elevate, family's a good thing. God is good. Family's good. Work is good at times. Pleasure is good at times, the right kind of pleasure. Hobbies are good. Relaxing is good. Exercise is good. Nutrition is good. Eating is good. But when these things become elevated above just existing, that's when you fall out of whack. And
I'm sure we can all kind of identify parts, even in our own lives, where there's a tendency to say like, hey, I'm a business owner. I'm an entrepreneur. And,
I'm a proud papa. And here's the thing. Here's the contradiction of it is we are constantly, it's one of those questions for God when I die, is we're constantly fighting and battling against that. We know, like the second I said these things, I'm like, yeah, this is true. And then I started thinking, okay, what am I going to eat tonight? I probably should exercise tomorrow. Like your mind, you're not your thoughts, but you constantly have these thoughts that distract you from what you are. Does that make sense?
I mean, that's usually what a lot of thoughts do, to be honest. And,
like,
that's the thing about
why?
thoughts.
Why would we be wired to have things that are placed into our brains that essentially
I don't know if we're so much wired. I think we've definitely been...
We've rewired ourselves over the years.
Yeah, it's been like rewired, reprogrammed. Things have been drilled into us for whatever reason. And yeah, it's kind of untangling a ball of knots, really, to get down to just the singular thread. Like, the thread of our lives. If you're like a ball of yarn, it's like, okay, well, let's just get to the base of this.
That's fascinating. So we often think of life as something that we're building on and we're growing and growing and growing and progressing. but maybe the secret is there's this big ball of yarn, and the secret to life is just untangling it till we get to what really exists and matters,
I think
or
so.
what really matters. Yeah.
I
Well,
think it's a difficult task, but I think once you start peeling back some of the things that you were either told this about yourself, and I think we talked about it, like
hmm
growing up and being told this about you and this is about you, and
hmm
then you start to believe it.
Yeah.
Then you get to an age where you're like, well, I can't do that because I was always too skinny, or I can't do this because I was just lanky. I was had to eat a cheeseburger. All the kind of shit that I've heard.
I ate plenty of cheeseburgers as a kid, so I'm the opposite of you.
But it's still
I know
it's
what you mean.
still
It's,
a
it's the
thing,
opposite,
right?
right?
And
So
to be honest, like when I was 18, 18 years old, I went most of my teenage years. I never wore a pair of shorts.
the
I
legs.
didn't wear shorts because it was always like, oh well, I'm kind of like too skinny and gangly for that.
Interesting that Josh doesn't wear shorts either. Your son.
Sure. But it's one of those things where I had to, decide I'm going to do this because I was sick of, being told this one thing, and got to break yourself
Now
out
you
of
look
that.
real good in shorts. She does. She looks
Thank
good
you.
in shorts and
Thank you.
the right type of a cut. So I think this episode should be titled "Flowing Down the River with a Ball of Yarn." I think it should be.
Well, whatever we remember from this,
Or like flowing down a river, parentheses, ball of yarn. We can do that later. But I think this has been I've enjoyed this episode. I hope people listening or watching, consuming it, enjoy it as much as I did. I got nothing else, D.
Yeah. Hey, maybe the next time we chit chat with you guys, we will have made some decision on our next
In a week?
move. In a week. A lot can happen in a week.
DeAnna, she's telling me to go with the flow, and I think that's right.
You can do it.
You're right. All right. Thanks, everybody. Peace out.